even those who are currently calling locally for Russian influence will not move to Russia. That what we saw in Benin was actually a pseudo, some sort of a stage-managed coup. There is also the conspiracy theory that they were also using Nigeria for the purpose of also containing the AES states.
Now, ECOWAS, can it fight back against Russia, China, France, UK?
Yeah, I think first of all, it is good to mention that ECOWAS is lame, and then of course a toothless bulldog.
So, Dr. Hashim, you were talking about mixed messages creating a vacuum that these foreign actors are seeking to basically fill. What do you think is the end game? So many experts have divergent opinions on this, but for you, what do you think is the end game?
Basically, is actually anti-Western frames, elevating messages that actually counters Western narrative. Basically, that is the fundamental element. There are growing concern that democracy apparently does not translate to good governance. And this, you know too well, has consistently been the pathway for the style of governance across the Western countries. But again, some of these colonialists also don't have the welfare of their former colonies at heart. And I think this also has shaped the kind of resentment in the minds of so many people across the Sahel. And the end game basically is that there are lots of warfare going on between the West and then of course the far left. And one of those war games is that there is supposed to be some element of new era of governance, which does not also put forward democracy. And you realize that that has been one of the biggest messaging that they have consistently pushed out there. And the idea generally is just to amplify that anti-Western frames does not sync with the people. And of course, the new generation of young people, which form over 60% of the population in West Africa, are beginning to align with this particular thinking. As a matter of fact, in Nigeria, during the End Bad Governance protests, there were times where young people mobilized with Russia flags, and they were calling on the president of Russia to come for their rescue. So you realize that this is just not happening in other countries, but here in Nigeria, that is actually the entire strength and powerhouse for the region, that young people are making those kinds of demand. So basically, the idea is just to be able to amplify some fake, but again, sympathetic news site that continues to suggest that the West does not have the interests of the people. But again, there are local realities that suggest so, and that is exactly what they are trying to also get. So it's about alternatives, finding alternatives to the existing system that does not affect the human capital index of the lives and add value to the lives of the people.
Now, geopolitically, when we look at West Africa, it seems a lot of people, like you said, just like you gave an example of what happened in Nigeria, where people were protesting with Russian flags and all that. But the migration patterns from West Africa seem to be telling a different story. People are calling on Russia, but the migration patterns show that young people want to move to France and the United Kingdom. Why do we have this divergence?
Yeah, the idea is basically for greener pasture and, of course, narratives of economic prosperity in the West. And you know too well that there are also news medium from the West that has also saturated young people in Africa to suggest that lives can actually be very transforming once you're able to move into that particular region. So yes, the issue of integrity of currency, the value of currency, the opportunities that are available, all of these things put together has actually shaped the mindset of the people. And then, of course, it suggested that there are also liberal environments to a large extent, not as policing as what you find in other communist countries like Russia, where a number of communist activities might also affect you. And most importantly is language. Language also plays a significant role. People want to get into a particular area and then, of course, settle in and begin to instantly find some kind of livelihood, interact with their locals, interact with would-be employees, and then, of course, find economic opportunities. So all of these things put together has actually influenced the choice of the West as a destination. But again, those who are locally here are seeing the colonialists as those who are not adding value to their lives and have preferred an alternative. And that is exactly what you see. Even those who are currently calling locally for Russian influence will not move to Russia. What they have simply just seen is that economic liberation and economic opportunities lies more in the West than you find in countries that are on the other wing.
Now, going back to the issues of coup d'etats in West Africa, the recent events in Guinea-Bissau, Benin more recently, have there been any online patterns of behavior that you have seen that has probably made you think that this might be coordinated?
Yeah, I mean, this suggests so very strongly, and that is because we have seen growing discrediting of civil institutions by some very big digital firms. And of course, there are also concerns that most of these digital firms are being procured by some state agents within some of these countries. So yes, that has happened. They have given citizens the belief that the courts, the media, and then of course those who are in the opposition reduces their perceived value that has come and have been added to their lives. So that is fundamental. And again, we have seen how observers have also reported that information warfare tactics has also been a rapid, coordinated narrative that has actually surged very lately. To the extent that we have seen how media blackouts, control of broadcast channels, has become one of the biggest weapons in the hand of state parties. They have used information and disinformation and narratives of press freedoms as one of the biggest weapons that they have seen to consistently attack or influence or provide citizens with information that oftentimes reverberates to rile the minds of the people. So the other opportunity that are there is for them to continue to stifle civic environment, which has also been one of the biggest weapons that we have seen that have been pushed forward. And unfortunately, pushing some of these things using the social media that has become one of the biggest space for young people and a lot of people who actively engage in civic environment has also not seen legitimate government using that, particularly democratic institutions, using that as a medium for communication. So that was a vacuum. That vacuum had actually been exploited. And that exploitation is actually sinking and is being bought by lots of young people within the Sahel. So how do you therefore want to coordinate a battleground that you have also not provided some arsenal to be able to engage with? I think that is, again, one of the biggest setbacks that ECOWAS in itself has done to itself by not providing some level of interested actors or institutions that are also interested in strategically communicating development and then, of course, giving hope to citizens. citizens. So this space was left vacuum, and it has been allowed to spread unverified claims and narratives, framing some level of information about how military coup is the best and the alternative that can help to engage further. And again, we've seen this in Benin just a few weeks ago. As a matter of fact, it has actually been insinuated that what we saw in Benin was actually a pseudo, some sort of stage-managed coup, just to be able to highlight some kind of information warfare as a way to respond. Yes, there were supposedly some claim that the West was interested and had also made that attempt. There is also the conspiracy theory that they were also using Nigeria for the purpose of also containing the AES states from further engaging. And then, of course, how the journalists and analysts have described this suggests that there is some more unfolding information that might also be coming out in the coming days. Deliberate narrative management is something that is fundamental, but we are not seeing ECOWAS and member states playing significant role across all of these. So this in itself is huge. And it is also being suggested that a lot of foreign orchestration of some of these platforms is something that requires additional forensic analysis so that at least those within the state's region can actually enjoy some stability. And the risk here is that if ECOWAS is not very deliberate, that this medium might also continue to amplify these false claims and false narratives. And before it is realized, every member state within ECOWAS and the Sahel may have fallen into military junta. Already they have bought the minds and hearts of citizens, but again, there is a need for a strategic and deliberate effort by ECOWAS to be able to contain, prevent, and of course resist this emerging infiltration that is coming from the Western communities.
It's interesting that you mentioned ECOWAS. We've had guests on this show who talked about a battle to capture the hearts and minds of young West Africans, that is what is ongoing right now between the West and the East. Now, ECOWAS, how much do you think ECOWAS can push back? How is the power of state-controlled and state-backed misinformation and disinformation affecting ECOWAS truly? And can it fight back against a Russia, a China, a France, a UK?
Yeah, I think first of all, it is good to mention that ECOWAS is lame, and then of course a toothless bulldog, and then of course all the regional protocols and all the regional instruments that have been established to be able to attract some sort of development across the region hasn't happened. You recall lately that ECOWAS transited from ECOWAS of the states to ECOWAS of the people. And then, of course, the spirit behind it is to be able to add value to the lives of the people within the region. One, to add value politically. Two, add economic value. Three, is to be able to provide a platform where people who are disenfranchised can also approach and engage. But unfortunately, the first challenge ECOWAS has made is that it has actually weakened its unified posture against state-backed influence in terms of operations. And this already has hampered its political will to call for any sort of coordinated effort or measures or countermeasures, as the case may be, whether against Western infiltration, because as it were, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger are already having direct support from Russia, which includes even mineral resources. They have opened bilateral trade agreements. And this is particularly to spite ECOWAS and the direction ECOWAS is going, and the position that ECOWAS hold in terms of expanding democracy in the region. So already they have some level of political fragmentation and divergent interests. So they can't even collectively engage in terms of having a unified front. And that is because the posture is particularly fragmented. The second one is the operational limits that ECOWAS has. There is primarily political and security union that lacks a standing in terms of how they respond to various levels of threat within the region, whether it is about engaging when coup d'etat happens or about to happen. We saw what happened in Burkina Faso and the intent to deploy the ECOWAS standby force and the resistance that pulled out the AES states. We saw what has happened in Benin, and Nigeria has actually deployed a troop to Benin. And then, of course, this has been backed up by the immediate deployment of the ECOWAS standby force. But again, I think the question remains, should ECOWAS be waiting until there is already a breakdown, or that ECOWAS should be proactive by providing some level of a proactive response and capability to some of this early warning that has actually started marching and crossing its border. And one of the things that I believe ECOWAS also hasn't done is how to fight cyber disinformation in the region and how to investigate cross-border campaigns in real time. There is apparently no tools within the ECOWAS community or as an institution to be able to integrate or have some sort of infrastructure to respond to some of these challenges. So it is big, and it is actually as a result of the reflection of what happens within the member state that is happening also within the ECOWAS as an institution. But most importantly, I think it's about bureaucracy that has also affected it, which hasn't really played out. And again, in terms of sanction, how has ECOWAS been able to also been very bold or very courageous to sanction countries that has also not been able to push its mantra of ECOWAS of the people by not holding tight to power, by ensuring that all the ECOWAS protocol on economy, on politics, on elections, on democracy are also further advanced. And this wouldn't have left any vacuum, whether deliberately on the ground in reality or in terms of narrative or information or disinformation. So ECOWAS hasn't fueled any of these things. And there is no citizen of a member state that will say genuinely they have had any positive value that ECOWAS has added to them. So the question remains, other than going to observe elections in all of these states, even elections of people who have held on to power for over 20 years, 30 years, how else has ECOWAS been able to directly add value to the lives of the people? That is also something that we also need to continue to analyze. Resource capacity gaps is also something that member states are lacking. We are not able to find all the entire digital forensics unit, ecosystem, resilience to some of these public information institutions and how to work around mitigating their risk. I believe very strongly that ECOWAS also needs to migrate from its traditional ways of engagement to a digital platform where it is robust to be able to engage citizens and, of course, government within the region in a more proactive manner. This hasn't happened, and this has continued to leave an opportunity and a space where others within the region, and of course those who have negative narrative to exploit. So the weakness means that ECOWAS oftentimes ends up reacting rather than being very proactive in neutralizing this information ecosystem.
Dr. Salaudeen Hashim, thank you for coming on InfoCheck.
Thank you very much for having me.